And over to our final discussant, Ms. Caitlin Wiesen, who's the country director for UNDP India.
Great. Thank you all. Last but hopefully not least here. And I just wanted to mention, first of all, it's an honor and delight and privilege to be here with you and with this distinguished panel. And I'm speaking here as country director of UNDP, but on behalf of Lise Grand, who is the UN resident coordinator and UNDP representative. It was mentioned earlier, and I just wanted to underscore that this seminar is happening at an extremely important moment in time. And that time is, yes, the launch of the 12th five-year plan, but also being held, as was mentioned earlier, in conjunction with the high-level review and debates on the post-2015 agenda. So I thought it was worthy just at this point to add a moment to say that as many of us in the audience are well aware, that India is likely to miss most of its MDG targets, with the exceptions perhaps of education enrollment, and this includes being off target, as we've heard, with relation to goals related to maternal, child, and infant mortality, and particularly nutrition. I did want to mention that the overarching goal of the 12th five-year plan of faster, more inclusive, and sustainable growth is an elusive one shared by many other emerging economies. And I would say at the outset, as has been said earlier, commend the government of India for the focus in the 12th five-year plan for focusing on the social sectors, including health and education, employment and skill development, women's agency and child rights, and social inclusion. Equally, investing in these key social sectors is central to advancing human development. And I thought I would just take a moment to share a few slides on how India compares in terms of its human development achievements with that of other countries. And here I'll be drawing largely from the recently published report from UNDP on the Human Development Report 2013 on the rise of the Global South. And before I share those, I should mention also that India has recorded significant growth in its Human Development Index, according to India's own Human Development Report, with lead author Hero Santosh Mehrotra. Between 1999 and 2008, India's HDI has increased by 21%, which is impressive. However, when we compare with other countries, India ranks 136 out of 187 countries, lagging behind BRICS and IPSA countries on both per capita gross national income as well as human development income. And notably, the Human Development Index for India is 15% lower than that for the average for other BRICS and IPSA countries. If we turn now to inequality, which is again something that's not unique to India, it's a persistent challenge in India as well as other countries, we notice that when we look at or adjust the Human Development Index for inequalities, that India loses 29% of its HDI value due to inequalities, and that this loss is greater than the average loss for most middle human development income countries, which is at 24%. So not faring so well. Among income, health, and education, the greatest loss due to inequality in India is the education dimension. There are some issues with the data there, but when we compare it with the average loss for middle HDI countries, it's quite significant. Equally, the loss of HDI value due to inequality, when we look at life expectancy, is 27%, compared with the average loss in middle-income human development value countries, which is 19%, another considerable gap. On the positive side, however, the loss of HDI value in India due to inequality of income at 15% is less than that of other middle-income countries. Just wanted to also look at another major concern in the context of the 12th plan and how this compares with other countries. And looking at gender-based inequalities, which are a major issue, and how India compares its performance with other countries. And just to highlight a few statistics, overall, India ranks 132 out of the 148 countries for which a gender inequality index has been established. It ranks lower on the gender inequality index than other BRICS countries, other IBSA countries, and within SAARC, it is second only to Afghanistan. This is largely on account of, one, the low percentage of seats held by women in parliament. Two, as we've heard earlier from the other speakers, the shockingly high level of the average adolescent fertility rate within India, and the lower than average female labor force, which is significant within middle income HDI countries as well as South Asia. In addressing these significant challenges, I just wanted to take a moment and share an analysis that was undertaken in the context of the Human Development Report that looks at those countries that have rapidly improved their human development performance and indicates that promoting equity, voice, and accountability are critical. There are 4 ways that were highlighted that were critically important to advancing human development incomes. Firstly, was addressing rising inequality. And countries with less inequality, the findings were do better by and large and improve more in human development. Secondly, and critically, is focusing on women's education and capacity development. And this was found to be essential to reducing gender inequality. Thirdly, is making governance structures more accountable. Educated and interconnected youth demanding greater accountability is vital. Fourthly, was the recommendation of encouraging participation for greater inclusion, which is essential for stability and social coherence. I think some of these are relevant to our conversation today, and I would just say against this background, I would speak to 3 issues, particularly related to the 12th plan. These are skill development, women's agency, and social inclusion. Turning to the first, on the issue of skill development, we've talked much about the demographic window of opportunity, the potential for the demographic dividend. And by 2020, India will be the youngest nation and also remain so till 2040. By 2020, it's estimated India will have a surplus of 56 million working people, and the rest of the world will have a shortage of 47 million people. And by 2022, India plans to skill 500 million persons. This is enormous. And the 12th plan accords it is a tremendous opportunity during the 12th plan, and they rightly place great importance on it. The plan document is well articulated on its strategies for development and expanding outreach, how to redefine better infrastructure, trainers. But I would like to highlight 3 questions where it may have fallen short or needs greater thinking. And this is related to the issue of skilling for youth and the issues of informality. One of the critical issues is or questions that I'll put these more in the form of questions, but how does one promote skilling in an environment of jobless growth, largely jobless growth? And how are we going to change that equation, where 85% of the workers are employed in the informal economy? If one thinks through, it's the most frustrating is to skill if there are not jobs to be skilled into. And how does one reach out to the informal economy workers who have a huge opportunity cost to take out time to skill themselves if they're not insured of a job to go to? And where will those jobs be coming from within the private sector? Where will the jobs be coming from overseas? And what attention is being given to the informal economy? Secondly, if we turn to the issue of skilling the girl youth, and I think this has been the issue raised is that how the girl child and the girl youth has been so excluded from the development process. And our work in many parts of India, and especially where patriarchal values do dominate, we find that the girl youth misses out opportunities for skilling, has very limited mobility to access skill development opportunities, and really needs a secure environment for learning and an outlet for where to go once that learning has been applied. The third area that needs much more thinking is how to reach out to tribal youth in left-wing extremist affected areas. We heard the very sobering note with which Dr. Saida Hamid opened this morning with the chilling murders and the evidence that's emerging that this was largely undertaken by youth 18 to 20 years old. The issue is, how are we going to reach out to these very difficult areas? We tend to look at skilling within certain sets of people who are easy to skill, who are easy to move into an employment force, but how do we skill for the unreached? And how do we develop programs that are going to be tailored to them, that will respect and ensure a secure job with dignity and with identity? It doesn't mean rolling out the same types of training that are provided to the usual. I raise these questions right now just because as we try to think of how to exclude the excluded in the skilling process, we will really need to be thinking of how to support organizations working with youth, women, and excluded in identifying specialized training programs that will reach and meet their particular needs. The second issue that I wanted to address was this issue of women's agency. And while there have been serious efforts made to promote gender equality through various legislations, policies, and schemes, women's status right now within the 12th plan continues to be an area of serious concern. Women and children, as we know, girl children face huge discrimination. The adverse child sex ratio under 6 is still a matter of grave concern. The crime records are terrible. They're increasing by some 29, crime against women has increased by almost 30% between 2006 and 2010. And finally, maternal mortality has fallen behind and well behind the target of the 11th plan. So clearly we still have a long way to go on women and women's agency, and would like to start by commending the 12th plan for focusing on gendering development planning and bringing about structural transformation, not only in the women related to direct policy and program interventions, but critically and more generally in policy and programs in many of the sectors that impact upon women's lives. Again, this whole issue that it can't be undertaken by one ministry, it needs to be an issue that's mainstreamed across all. When we look across the plan at the overall agenda for inclusive growth, there are several opportunities for women that are critical, and I would like to highlight just 3. The first is the immense scope for enhancing women's role in the unorganized sector. Almost 400 million people, more than 85% of the working population in India, working in the unorganized sector. And of these, at least 120 million are women. Would just like to remind the group that the recommendations of the Arjun Sengupta Committee report still stand valid today from the perspective of women working in the unorganized sector. Typically, she lacks savings, support systems, which means there are no fallbacks in emergency. She is dependent on low wages, often an insufficient return for her labor, and a work environment that can often extract long working hours and impose terrible safety hazards. So as we move forward, ensuring inclusion, it is imperative that women's contribution is given due credit, that statutory provisions such as those for migrants, regulation of employment and working conditions, maternity benefits, etc., are strongly implemented. Secondly, is women's positioning in the informal economy needs to change. From unorganized producers at the bottom of the supply chain or value chain to organized producers equipped with better skills, knowledge of the markets, and ability to manage and run enterprises. There are millions of jobs that need to be created and incomes from enterprises and businesses that need to be enhanced. To achieve an 8.2% growth rate during the 12th plan period, it will be critical that we provide an enabling environment for millions of women in the unorganized sector who can contribute to the growth as well as benefit from it. A new and renewed culture of entrepreneurship that places faith in the capacities of rural producers will define the next generation of rural growth. 1 minute more. So let me go move to thank you. And then I would just highlight the third issue is that of social inclusion. And here it's an issue that cuts across the entire plan. And it's an issue that is absolutely essential to reaching persistently excluded groups, and particularly vulnerable tribal groups, manual scavengers, transgender, people with disabilities. And from our findings, what we've found are 4 key points, and I will leave these with you as the key points. One is that we need to address the particular vulnerabilities of these groups. We need to look at interventions, be it livelihoods, education, health services, social protection. We need to look at what their specific needs are and how we can best reach them. And organizations of the socially excluded need to have their needs be representative and actively integrated into planning decision-making processes at all levels. And 3, the schemes and plans of central and state government need to make special efforts to outreach to these groups. We tend to reach the same group again and again and not reach those who are persistently excluded from the process. And 4th, we need to continue all of these within the context of a very strong rights-based framework. I would just leave with one final note, and it's one that's been stated over the course of the previous speakers, but that a key challenge for social inclusion is that of innovation and scale. There is fantastic work that's happening at district and block levels in pilots. Much more needs to be done on systematically learning from these, scaling, learning from what didn't work, and if we can't address scale, we won't be able to address the challenges of the social sector within the 12th plan. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the deliberations.
Thank you very much indeed, Caitlin, for focusing our attention on jobless growth, on the unorganized sector, and especially on the needs of women and girls in particular. Okay, I will take this opportunity to actually make sort of 7 or 8 sets of points, which very much respond to many of the things that have been said by this panel, but also have been raised this morning. Well, where do you think it came from? It came from a paper that we put out in February, and we were delighted that in the Economic Survey, Chapter 2, Raghuram Rajan, the special chapter, takes cognizance of precisely that. But they did it after we put that out, and all the media was talking about it, because that's what the data is telling us. So we don't pull our punches, and you will see that I will not pull my punches either. Because I must begin by saying that I was delighted as compared to the 11th plan process, which I was involved in as well, but with the 12th plan process, because the 12th plan process was considerably more consultative. A lot more stakeholder discussions took place. A lot more use was made of the internet and of social media to actually seek opinions. So it was in that sense an attempt by at least the Planning Commission to learn. Because it's nobody's case that even in government, it's nobody's case that we're really succeeding with inclusiveness and growth. So let me yet point to some 2 or 3 what I believe are really truly success stories in the 11th plan period. So in the 11th plan period, which sort of are reflected at the beginning of the document. You will recall that during the 10th plan period, which is 2002 to 2007, we achieved a growth rate of 7.7% per annum, which was unprecedented in the history of our country. Now, you may well say this coincided with a period of rapid growth in the international economy, and so we were riding that wave. But surprise, surprise, that despite the global economic and financial crisis, which did impact us significantly in 2008 and after, the 11th plan clocked a growth rate of 7.9% per annum. It's nearly 8% per annum. So we exceeded the 10th plan rate, and we're pretty much at 8% per annum. Now, That's point one. Point two is that this growth rate, and by the way, I was the one who wrote the chapter in the 11th plan on poverty reduction, and if you recall reading that, you will see how downbeat that chapter is. It's truly downbeat, because it tells the real story. We were, of course, relying upon 2004-05 NSS consumption expenditure data, and what told us about poverty is that, using the URP, the Uniform Recall Period, not the MRP, which is now used, and using the previous Lakdawala method as opposed to now the Tendulkar method, while there'd been a significant decline in poverty rate, meaning the incidence of poverty systematically between 1973-74 and 2004-05, the numbers of the poor, the absolute numbers of the poor, hardly declined at all in that 30-year period, from 73-74 to 2004-05. Now that's a shocking state of affairs, meaning that we had 320 million poor people in 1973-74, and we had 300 million poor people in 2004-05. Consistent method across time, consistent definition, obviously updated for price rise. However, if you look at what happened between 2004-05 and 2009-10, and more recently the consumption expenditure data is coming out from the NSS of 10-11,